In the last episode, we met Peter, a first-time farmer who's made the transition to regenerative agriculture. We discover why he changed and what his experience has been like.
It's wonderful.
Today, we dive into more detail about drought resilience, the health of Peter's animals, and the costs of running his business. You mentioned that one of the key reasons that you instigated the changes on the farm was for drought resilience. We were going through a drought, and how's that going for you?
Yeah, that was the initial driver. Since then, there's a lot more in terms of the whole ecology and so on. But in terms of the drought, with Brian Welberg and Alan Savory method, you learn about how to deal with drought. Now, really bad drought like we had, or floods, are never a good thing. Even in drought, you do get some rain. And the whole objective is to be able to retain that moisture in your soils. If you've got badly depleted soils and you've got crusting soils, any rainfall that you get is just going to run off. So what you want to develop is soils that will absorb the water and hold the moisture.
In the bigger picture, 3 years isn't very long. Do you think you've seen much change? Do you think you've built some drought resilience already?
Yes, I do. I do think so. My cover is very, very good. If you walk along and you look down, you won't see any bare earth. Short dry periods, I feel I've got no problem. We had that last year. I do believe that I'm in a much better spot now than I was.
So we know that the cattle are in better health now. They seem to have a lot less incidence of sickness and illness. Let's just take a look closer at the data and see what we can work out.
Well, I was meticulous in recording all the instances of diseases that are detected in the cattle. It's a small data set, but before I started regenerative agriculture and just after, I had quite a high incidence of diseases and then a really, really sharp drop-off. And in the last 2 years, we've had 2 cases of sickness, one foot rot and one pink eye. Long may that continue, because it's not much fun having diseases in your cattle. And it's not good for the cattle either. I must say, in that time, in that first 10 months of 2022, I had a lot of diversity in the grasses. I had a lot of legumes, all sorts of things that I'd sown in the previous year. The cattle did get a diverse diet rather than a mono diet. Maybe that pulled them through. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm really happy that only 2 instances of disease in the last, basically 2 years. Fantastic.
So one of the other benefits in eliminating the use of some of the extra inputs, can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
It's true for any business. Any business, doesn't matter, farming, manufacturing, whatever. You want to reduce your cost, because reduction in cost goes straight to the bottom line. So as we've seen, stopping to use fertilizers and herbicides, those costs have gone straight out the business. And it's not just the cost of the fertilizer, it's the cost of applying it, spending money on diesel. Another significant cost is irrigation. I've got a nice little infrastructure here for irrigating. At the end of the drought in 2019, that last quarter, my electricity bill was $850. That was not only the cost of the electricity, but there's also the cost of the water on top of that. What I'm doing now is I'm just showing multi-species seeds in by hand, and that's a little interesting exercise on its own, because my tractor for doing that has cost me $110. It's just a little hand seeder, and what I do is I just go in, walk through the area that I'm going to feed the cattle on that day, just spread the seed and let the cattle trample it in. And the results I got have been pretty good. And the seeds that are there will germinate at some time when the conditions are right. What my strategy now is to sow in perennials, so that they just keep coming up year after year, and then just supplementing that year on year with for a property this size, with a few thousand dollars worth of seed. Okay. And another advantage is when you go and sow the seed, it's a good little walk, it's a good little workout. The initial setup costs for my regenerative initiative, I suppose, is the cost of the fencing and the cost of all the star posts. I spent $6,000 to $7,000 on that. I believe it's paid for itself already. What I will say, though, is that I have done a bit more mowing than I did before. Each paddock, at the moment, once a year, I'm mowing it just to mulch it.
So in summary, over the 6 or so years that you've been looking after the farm, do you think your change of practices overall has saved you money?
Oh, absolutely. I think taking those direct costs out, the cost of materials, fertilizers and so on, and the cost of electricity and water, very, very much reduced. The other thing is making silage and hay, which is another cost that I've basically taken out of the business. But there is a trade-off, and that is your time every day to go and move cattle, to set up to move cattle and so on. So I'm trying to make that as efficient as possible. And right now it's coming down to probably an hour and a half a day. And I don't see that as work. I just so enjoy going out in the early morning, being with the cattle. You watch them walking past, you check them out to see if there's anything wrong.
Of the 76 hectares that you're currently farming on, do you need to use all of that land, or do you have some of it set aside for other purposes?
So let's go before I started regenerative agriculture. The farm was divided into 3 sections. When I was set stocking, all of that was used. I had cattle this side, I had cattle in the middle part, and I had cattle up on the mountain. Now I'm really almost running the same 60 on 41 hectares. So the top 35 hectares are just standing idle. Okay, so they're really for the kangaroos and for any wildlife and so on up there. It's also an area that if I want to go away for a couple of weeks, I can take my whole herd, put them up there for 2 weeks. I could almost have the same number of cattle on 41 hectares than 76. I've been sectioning off areas of the creek, totally dedicated to wildlife, and then planting trees and protecting the creek and so on. It gets even better than that because the farm is basically ridge, valley, ridge, valley, ridge, valley. My main pasture areas are on the ridges, and the valleys, I try to keep the cattle out of the valleys for as much as I can, but they also like go-to areas, which if I have to go away for 2 days, I can put them in a valley, they're in there for 2 days and then out. If I really wanted to push it, I could quite comfortably handle more head, and I'm confident that leading into the winter, we'll go okay. In summary, from a lifestyle point of view, from a farming lifestyle point of view, from your own sense of well-being, it's significantly better.
In the next episode, we look at Peter's soils and his plans for the future.